It was just past midnight at Balmoral Castle when the corridors fell silent. Only the distant ticking of an antique clock dared to interrupt the quiet. A frail voice, barely above a whisper, summoned her most trusted aide. The queen, pale beneath the soft amber glow of the bedside lamp, spoke not as a monarch, but as a woman unburdening a secret that had haunted her reign. Her confession trembled through the air, a truth buried beneath decades of royal protocol and carefully guarded facades. Outside, the wind pressed against the stone walls as if listening, carrying her final words into the Scottish night. What she revealed would shake the foundation of the monarchy itself. A revelation tied not to politics or scandal, but to blood, lineage, and betrayal buried within her own family's name. The aide leaned closer, his ear nearly brushing her trembling lips. "It was never Charles," she murmured, her words heavy as lead. "The true heir was hidden to protect the crown." The sentence fractured midway, dissolving into a whisper that even the walls seemed to strain to hear. He froze, uncertain whether grief or duty bound him in place. The queen's eyes searched his, pleading not for understanding but for silence, an oath to carry her burden beyond her final breath. Outside, the storm intensified, thunder echoing like judgment. Somewhere in the distance, the chapel bell tolled, though none had rung it. Moments after the aide stumbled from the room, the weight of her confession pressing on his chest like stone. In the corridor, Lady Margaret Ashworth, the Queen's private secretary, intercepted him. Her sharp eyes read the panic in his expression before he spoke. "She said something extraordinary," he whispered. "Something about the line of succession." Lady Margaret's lips tightened, color draining from her face. "Then you must forget it," she replied coldly, "for the good of the realm." Yet even as she said it, her hands trembled, for she too had heard rumors whispered through palace walls for decades. Downstairs in the Queen's study, the royal physician signed the death certificate with a hand that hesitated mid-stroke. He had been told to record natural causes. Yet his eyes lingered on the blank margin beside remarks. He remembered the Queen's final breath. A whisper so faint he could not tell if it was confession or prayer. Behind him, a gust of wind knocked a stack of letters to the floor. Among them, a sealed envelope bearing the insignia of the House of Windsor and the faint imprint of the Queen's ring. It was addressed not to Charles, but to someone whose name had been erased from official records decades ago. At dawn, the flag above Balmoral was lowered to half-mast. Across the estate, mist clung to the moors like mourning veils. But within the castle, a quiet battle had already begun. Between truth and tradition, between those who would honor the Queen's last words and those who would bury them. The aide stared out the window, her final whisper echoing in his mind. The crown must protect itself, even from its own blood. He knew then that the real storm had only just begun. One that would not end with her passing, but ignite a centuries-old secret long kept from the world. The morning after the Queen's passing, Balmoral was draped in mourning, black ribbons tied to every banister, whispers echoing down marble halls. But within the silence, Sir Andrew's mind churned with unrest. He had found himself unable to sleep, haunted by the Queen's final words. Drawn by an unexplainable force, he returned to her private study. There, behind the great oak desk, he noticed a drawer left ajar. Something Her Majesty would never have allowed. Inside lay the sealed envelope he'd seen the physician handle, its wax cracked by time. Against his better judgment, he opened it. Inside was a letter written in the Queen's delicate hand, dated 1960. The words inside would change everything. To protect the line, I was forced to conceal the truth. The child was born of royal blood, yet outside wedlock. His existence endangers the throne. He read it again, slower this time, tracing the ink with trembling fingers. The child was born in secrecy at Sandringham, December 1960. His heart raced. That was the same year Princess Margaret's rumored illness had secluded her from the public eye. Could the Queen have used her sister's retreat as a cover for her own scandal? Beneath the letter was a faded photograph. A baby wrapped in royal silk, no name written beneath it. The Queen's ring glimmered faintly in the picture, her hand resting protectively on the child's shoulder. Andrew's breath hitched. The implications were staggering. If this child survived, the rightful claim to the throne might belong not to Charles, but to someone who had lived their entire life in obscurity. Later that afternoon, Lady Margaret entered the study to find Sir Andrew staring at the open drawer. "You shouldn't have come back," she whispered. He turned, eyes wild. "She hid a child, Margaret. A child of royal blood." The air thickened. Lady Margaret's face hardened, but her silence betrayed her knowledge. "There are things," she said slowly, "that must remain buried for the crown's sake." But Andrew's conscience had already turned against duty. "The truth doesn't die with her," he said. "It's alive, and it deserves to be known." Her gaze softened briefly. "Then God help us both," she murmured, for she knew the crown's protectors would stop at nothing to keep such a secret buried. That evening, the royal archivist, Thomas Weller, arrived unannounced, summoned by someone higher than either Andrew or Margaret. His reputation for discretion was unmatched, his loyalty to the monarchy unquestioned. "I'm here for certain documents," he said, voice low, eyes scanning the room. Andrew instinctively covered the letter with a folder. Weller noticed. "Her Majesty's final correspondence belongs to the Crown now." His tone left no room for argument, yet when Andrew hesitated, Weller's gaze hardened. "If you value your life, Forsyth, forget what you read." The air between them turned glacial. In that moment, Andrew realized this was no longer a royal matter. It was a cover-up orchestrated by forces far older and more dangerous than the monarchy itself. That night, Andrew slipped out of Balmoral with the letter tucked inside his coat. The wind howled through the pines as he drove down the narrow road leading away from the castle. He could still hear the Queen's dying words. The true heir was hidden. Somewhere, that heir was alive, unaware of the bloodline pulsing in their veins. The headlights cut through fog like blades, illuminating a crossroads ahead. Behind him, two black cars appeared, headlights too steady, too close. His pulse quickened. He pressed the accelerator, realizing the truth was now more than history. It was a death sentence. The Crown's silence had begun to hunt. The roads twisted like veins through the Highland fog as Sir Andrew Forsyth drove toward Inverness, heart pounding beneath his coat. Every flash of lightning behind him reminded him of the black cars that had followed him, and the secret burning in his pocket. The Queen's letter was more than a confession. It was a key to a truth the world had never been allowed to see. In a roadside inn, he unfolded the final page once more. Scribbled in faint ink was a single line: "Seek the orphanage at Dunmore Abbey." The child's name was changed to protect him. Andrew's hands trembled. Somewhere in those stone halls, the hidden heir had lived a life untouched by crowns. Until now. Dawn painted the moors in cold silver as he approached Dunmore Abbey. The orphanage stood forgotten, ivy crawling over its stone walls, its sign faded by decades of rain. Inside, dust covered everything except one door marked Archives. He pushed it open and found ledgers stacked like tombstones. In one dated January 1961, he found it. Infant male. Transferred from Sandringham under directive of the palace. No surname. Only initials, A.W. His pulse quickened. Hidden among the royal charities, a name recurred in later files: Arthur Windsor. A child fostered through Crown funds, vanishing from record at age 10. In London, decades earlier, Arthur Windsor had grown into a man unaware of his lineage, now living as Arthur Bell, 62. A quiet historian in Oxford, his life was one of solitude and scholarship. Sir Andrew tracked him down through the orphanage's last financial record. a scholarship paid by a private royal trust. When he arrived at the old university library, he saw Arthur hunched over ancient manuscripts, his silver hair reflecting the lamp's golden glow. "Arthur Windsor," Andrew whispered, the name foreign even to its owner. Arthur looked up, eyes narrowing. "That name died long ago," he said. "Who are you to resurrect it?" Andrew laid the Queen's letter on the table between them. "She wanted you to know the truth before she died," he said softly. Arthur read it in silence. The color drained from his face as each word unfurled the weight of a hidden life. "My mother was her," he whispered, voice trembling. "The Queen herself?" Andrew nodded. "Born in secrecy, placed here to protect the crown." Arthur stood, backing away as though the truth itself were poison. "You're telling me I've lived my whole life in exile from my own name?" he demanded. Outside, the bell tower struck noon, a chime that echoed like a coronation no one would ever see. Moments later, the silence was shattered by footsteps echoing down the marble corridor. Two men in dark suits entered, agents of the Crown's private intelligence branch. "Mr. Forsyth." "You're coming with us," one said coldly. Arthur stepped between them. "He's told me nothing but truth. If you silence him, you silence her last wish." The taller agent's eyes flickered. Pity or fear? Andrew couldn't tell. "This never happened," the man replied. "For your sake, sir." As the agents left, Arthur turned to Andrew. "If my mother spent her life guarding the lie, then I'll spend mine revealing it." For the first time, Andrew felt hope and dread in equal measure. The storm had passed, but the danger hadn't. 2 days after the confrontation at Oxford, Sir Andrew Forsyth and Arthur Bell met in secret at a safe house near Hampstead. Newspapers blared tributes to the late Queen, yet beneath the headlines, whispers circulated. Unsealed letters. Missing aid. Archived scandal. Arthur stared at the Queen's handwriting again, tracing each word as if memorizing his mother's voice. "She lived her entire life in duty," he murmured. "And I, in silence." Sir Andrew leaned forward, urgency etched across his tired face. "Arthur, if you want the truth to live, you'll have to face the palace itself. That letter alone won't survive their cleansing fire." By nightfall, they arrived in London, blending into the crowd gathered outside Buckingham Palace. A sea of flowers and grief masked the undercurrent of secrecy that lingered behind the gates. From a distance, Arthur watched the guards change post, their synchronized precision as cold as the walls they protected. "I was born here," he said quietly, "yet I've never been welcome." Andrew studied him. The resemblance to the Queen was faint but undeniable. "The palace archives hold the key," Andrew said. "But they're sealed under royal directive. We'll need help from someone inside." Arthur turned, his gaze firm. "Then we find the one person still loyal to her memory, not her legacy." Their ally came in the form of Eleanor Finch, the palace archivist, once an apprentice to Thomas Weller. Eleanor, 47, agreed to meet them in the crypt-like sublevels of Westminster Abbey, where history slept behind iron doors. "You're lucky I still believe in the old Queen's decency," she said. "Weller destroyed much, but he didn't find everything." From a hidden compartment, she pulled out a thin folder sealed with red wax. "These are baptism records, and one forged birth certificate," she whispered. "It names the mother only as E. Windsor. The child's surname was changed before the ink dried." Arthur's hand shook as he reached for it. "Then it's true," he said, voice breaking. "All of it." They had barely left the Abbey when headlights flared at the far end of the street. 2 black sedans, silent, unmarked. Andrew pushed Arthur into a narrow alley as doors opened and suited figures emerged. Eleanor froze, clutching the folder. "Go!" Andrew hissed, but one of the agents called her name. "Ames. Finch. You're in possession of royal property." His voice was steady, almost kind. Eleanor stepped forward slowly. "If the truth is property, then the crown owns every lie," she said before tossing the folder to Arthur. He caught it as she was seized. Her final glance toward them was one of defiance, not fear. Hours later, in a cramped London flat, Arthur opened the stolen folder with trembling fingers. Inside were 2 documents: a baptism record, Saint Mary Magdalene Sandringham, and a letter in the Queen's hand dated the day after his birth. "He is my greatest love, and my greatest secret. Should the world ever know, may they forgive me." Tears streaked Arthur's face as he read it aloud. "Or your weapon." Outside, dawn broke over the city, painting the rooftops gold, the same hue as the crown that would soon tremble under the weight of its truth. The news cycle turned relentless. It began with a single leak, a blurred image of the Queen's secret letter, uploaded anonymously at dawn. Within hours, every network from London to New York echoed the same question. Who is Arthur Bell? In his small London flat, Arthur watched his own face on television, frozen between fear and disbelief. "They know," he whispered. Sir Andrew Forsyth stood at the window, blinds drawn tight. "They don't know enough," he said, "but they will soon." The room vibrated with a tension between exposure and purpose. For decades, the monarchy had built its fortress on silence. Now, one voice, calm, truthful, and royal by blood, was about to bring it crashing down. By afternoon, reporters surrounded the flat. The air buzzed with helicopters and shouted questions. "Are you the Queen's hidden son? Do you claim the throne?" Arthur stepped out onto the small balcony, wind sweeping through his gray hair. Cameras flashed like lightning. "I seek no throne," he said, voice steady. Only the truth she carried to her grave. The crowd went silent. His tone was neither defiant nor pleading, only resolute. From a distance, Sir Andrew watched, realizing that the secret they had fought to reveal now belonged to the world. Yet somewhere beyond the lenses behind palace walls, the silence of the crown deepened, calculating its next move. Within hours, Buckingham Palace issued a statement. "These claims are without merit. Yet photographs of the Queen's letter, her handwriting unmistakable, spread faster than the denial. Across the world, commentators debated bloodlines. Historians whispered of hidden archives. And the British public began to wonder what else their monarchy had buried. Inside the palace, a different storm brewed. Thomas Weller, 59, stood before the king's advisors, face pale. "It should never have surfaced," he muttered. "The Queen's private records were sealed." One advisor replied sharply, "Then find him and make it right." But Weller knew what that meant. Silence was the crown's oldest language. That night, Arthur and Sir Andrew fled London. Through winding country roads, headlights cutting through the fog, they drove toward the coast. "They won't let this stand," Andrew said quietly. "The crown survives by erasure." Arthur turned toward him, eyes hollow but steady. "Then, let them try to erase me." He opened the window, letting the cold wind fill the car. In the distance, the faint glow of the Channel shimmered. "If my blood bears her truth," Arthur murmured, "then it's my duty to free it, not rule by it." The words felt like both rebellion and prayer. Behind them, London burned with cameras, lies, and legacy. "What sure we're told? Why?" They reached over by dawn. As gulls screamed above the white cliffs, Arthur stood facing the sea, the folder of evidence clutched in his hands. "This is where she first left for duty," he whispered, "and where I'll begin mine." Sir Andrew placed a passport in his palm, forged discreet. "You'll be safe abroad. For now." Arthur shook his head. "Safety is for those with something to lose. I've already lost everything except truth." He turned toward the ferry ramp, boarding among strangers, disappearing into the morning mist. Andrew watched until the ship vanished on the horizon. The heir in exile had begun his own reign, not of power, but of revelation. Weeks passed, and silence became the monarchy's defense. But silence could not bury truth anymore. In Geneva, Arthur Bell, the hidden heir, sat in a discreet hotel room overlooking Lake Leman. The envelope he carried now contained not just letters, but DNA results from a secret test Sir Andrew had arranged before their flight. The results were irrefutable. A 99.8% maternal match to Queen Elizabeth II. She wanted the truth protected, Arthur said to the empty room, not hidden. He drafted a final message, a declaration of lineage and forgiveness, ready to release it to the world. In London, the palace prepared its own counterstrike, a statement not of denial, but destruction. Back in London, Buckingham Palace became a fortress. Sir Andrew Forsyth, 65, now declared a traitor by the Crown, had gone underground. In a hidden apartment in South Kensington, he watched the BBC broadcast with dread. The king, solemn and severe, addressed the nation. These allegations dishonor Her Majesty's memory and seek to fracture what she built. But even as he spoke, a ripple of doubt spread through the public. For beneath the polished veneer of the king's statement, the people saw fear, the kind that only truth could inspire. Andrew turned off the television and whispered, "Your Majesty, even you cannot command blood." Arthur's message went live at midnight, a pre-scheduled release sent to every major news outlet across continents. His words were calm, almost regal. "I claim no throne, only acknowledgement. I am her son, and she was human, capable of both love and fear. Let that truth be her legacy." The broadcast spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace once again, this time not in mourning, but in awakening. Chants rose from the gates. Tell the truth. For the first time in a century, the monarchy faced not rebellion but reckoning. And this one was born not of politics, but of lineage. Inside the palace, Thomas Weller, 59, stood alone in the archival vaults. Every document, every photograph, every whisper of history was under his control. Until now, his hands trembled as he fed the original baptism record into a furnace. Flames consumed the evidence, yet in his reflection on the glass, guilt burned brighter. Behind him, a voice emerged from the dark. "Too late, Weller." Lady Margaret Ashworth, 52, returned from Balmoral, stepped into the light holding a flash drive. "You burned one copy. I kept another." Her gaze hardened. "You thought you were saving the crown. You were only burying the woman who wore it." By dawn, the monarchy's website went dark, hacked by an anonymous group calling themselves Regnum Veritas. The Queen's sealed confession appeared across every major outlet, complete with her handwriting, signature, and DNA verification. In Geneva, Arthur watched the sun rise over the Alps. "It's done," he said softly. Sir Andrew's voice crackled through the phone. "The world knows." Arthur smiled faintly. "Then the crown can finally rest." He closed his eyes as church bells rang from across the city, echoing across the water like her memory. Not as a monarch's final decree, but a mother's unspoken truth. Finally free. The world stood divided. Parliament demanded answers. The church demanded penance. And the people, for the first time in living memory, demanded choice. Across Europe, headlines blazed. "Hidden heir discovered." The monarchy at war with its past. From Geneva, Arthur Bell watched the unraveling of centuries through a hotel television. Sir Andrew Forsyth's voice came through the line, faint but firm. "You've given them truth. But truth without direction breeds chaos." Arthur turned toward the window, eyes fixed on the Alps. "Then I'll give them peace," he said. "Not by claiming a throne, but by ending one." The heir's final act would not be of power, but of surrender. At Westminster, the king's advisors gathered in panic. "He's become a martyr," one hissed. public sympathy is shifting. But the king, silent until now, rose from his chair. "Then let him speak," he said quietly. "The people will see what blood without duty looks like." Yet, even as he spoke, he felt the tremor of doubt in his own chest. For deep down, he knew what every monarch fears, that the bloodline he defended was shared by another, more rightful soul. Across the channel, Arthur received an invitation embossed with gold. An audience at Westminster Abbey. The setting, symbolic, historic, and final. When Arthur entered Westminster Abbey, the air itself seemed to bow under the weight of history. Choir music drifted faintly from the rafters as the king approached down the nave. They faced each other beneath the great stained glass window, two sons of the same mother, bound by different destinies. "You could destroy everything she built," the king said. Arthur shook his head. "No, I can set it free." He reached into his coat and produced the queen's final letter. "She didn't hide me to protect her crown. She hid me to protect her family." Silence filled the abbey. "And a monarchy," Arthur whispered, "and her secret finally dies in peace." Outside the abbey, thousands gathered. When the great doors opened, no fanfare sounded, only silence. Arthur and the king stepped side by side down the stone steps. The king turned to the crowd and raised his hand. "The crown's duty has always been to serve," he said. "Today it fulfills that duty one last time." He removed the ring from his finger, the sovereign seal, and placed it in Arthur's open palm. "Not to rule," he said softly, "but to remember." Cameras flashed, tears fell, and centuries of tradition ended not with rebellion, but with grace. Months later, in a quiet village in the Scottish Highlands, Arthur lived simply, tending roses in a garden that overlooked the moors. The world had changed. Britain had chosen democracy over dynasty, truth over ceremony. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Sir Andrew Forsyth, 65, visited. "You ended what began in a whisper," he said. Arthur smiled faintly. "No, she did." He looked toward the horizon, where Balmoral's distant spires gleamed faintly through the mist. "The crown wasn't stolen or lost," he said softly. "It was finally set down. The wind carried the scent of rain and roses, and with it, peace."